The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as 17-year-old Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her combat boots planted at shoulder width, hands positioned in a defensive stance no ordinary teenager should know. Around her, 5 of Millfield High's most feared seniors lay scattered across the pizzeria floor like broken chess pieces. The security camera would later show exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds of systematic destruction. One military daughter against impossible odds, turning their own weapons against them. But this story begins 3 weeks earlier. The October rain hammered against the windshield as Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez navigated the winding roads toward Millfield, Connecticut. His daughter Elena sat in the passenger seat, spine straight despite the uncomfortable position, dark eyes scanning the unfamiliar landscape with methodical precision. At 17, she possessed the hypervigilant awareness that marked children of career soldiers, always cataloging exits, assessing threats, preparing for the unexpected. "Fourth school in 3 years, Eleanor observed, her voice carrying neither complaint nor emotion, simply stating tactical reality. Miguel's weathered hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your grandfather grew up here before shipping out to Korea, small town, good people mostly." Elena caught the qualification immediately. In military families, every word carried weight, and her father never spoke carelessly. Mostly, every community has its politics. Your grandfather had some disagreements with certain families before he enlisted. Ancient history. The Rodriguez family had served for 4 generations, each member understanding that duty meant sacrifice, not just for the soldiers, but for the families who followed orders, packed belongings, and started over wherever the military demanded. Elena had learned early that being the perpetual outsider required specific skills, rapid assessment, strategic adaptation, and emotional distance. As they pulled into the driveway of their new rental house on Maple Street, Elena automatically noted the sight lines, potential escape routes, and defensive positions. The modest 2-story colonial looked identical to dozens of others they'd called home, distinguished only by the precision with which Miguel positioned their American flag, exactly perpendicular to the ground, bottom edge hanging precisely 6 feet above the concrete. Inside, Carmen Rodriguez unpacked medical textbooks with the efficient movements of someone who had performed this ritual too many times. A former Army medic turned civilian nurse practitioner, she maintained the organizational habits that had served her through multiple combat deployments. Her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she reviewed patient files while simultaneously directing the arrangement of furniture. "How was the cemetery?" she asked without looking up from her tablet. "Respectful," Miguel replied, hanging his jacket with military precision. "Traffic was manageable. We'll be fully operational by tomorrow evening." Elena retrieved bottled water from their tactical supply kit, automatically conducting inventory. 24 bottles, medical supplies for 1 week, non-perishable food for 5 days. The Rodriguez household maintained readiness protocols that civilian families would consider excessive, but military experience had taught them that preparation prevented casualties. During dinner, Miguel focused on his daughter with characteristic directness. "First day at Millfield High tomorrow. You've studied the layout." Elena nodded. 4 main corridors, gymnasium east wing, cafeteria central, 7 emergency exits, administrative offices positioned to monitor primary entrance. Carmen exchanged a glance with Miguel, the silent communication of parents who had navigated multiple deployments together. "Maybe we could discuss typical school activities, clubs, sports, social opportunities." "Neither team. Basketball team finished second in regionals last year," Elena offered. "Advanced placement chemistry would strengthen college applications." The conversation followed familiar patterns, balancing military tactical awareness with attempts at normal family discussion. Elena understood her parents' desire for her to experience typical teenage activities, but her upbringing had instilled habits that marked her as different even when she attempted to blend in. After dinner, the converted garage served as their training facility. Heavy bags hung from reinforced ceiling mounts, and a locked equipment case contained non-lethal training weapons. Miguel adjusted Elena's stance on the practice mat, his instruction carrying the weight of hard experience. Krav Maga focuses on ending threats efficiently, he explained, repositioning her elbow. Against larger opponents, use their momentum against them. Never attempt to match strength. Redirect force and create distance. Elena executed the maneuver with practiced precision, pivoting to send Miguel off balance while delivering a controlled strike that stopped just short of his throat. 4 years of training had developed her capabilities beyond typical teenage parameters, though she hoped never to need them outside controlled environments. Good. But remember, this knowledge carries responsibility. Force is always the last option, only when all alternatives are exhausted. Understood, Elena replied, recognizing the ethical framework that governed their training. Her father wasn't preparing her for aggression. He was ensuring she could protect herself if civilian protections failed. As they secured the equipment, Elena asked the question that had been building since their arrival. Why did you start teaching me this when I was 13? Most kids were playing soccer. Miguel paused, his expression darkening with memories that still influenced his tactical decisions. Afghanistan, 2019. Female soldier was cornered outside our perimeter by 3 contractors. She had combat training, but had never practiced applying it against coordinated attackers specifically targeting her gender. He secured the practice weapons with methodical care before continuing. By the time we responded to her distress call, she had sustained injuries that ended her military career. That night I called your mother and promised I'd never let that happen to my daughter. The explanation clarified Miguel's motivation without creating unnecessary anxiety. Elena's training wasn't based on paranoid fears, but on realistic assessment of potential threats that military families faced when integrating into civilian communities. As she prepared for bed, Elena reviewed the intelligence she had gathered about Millfield High, student population 847, with typical socioeconomic stratification reflected in parking arrangements and extracurricular participation. Sports dominated social hierarchy, with academic achievement providing secondary status channels. Faculty experience varied significantly, suggesting inconsistent disciplinary approaches. What her research couldn't reveal were the invisible power structures that governed teenage social dynamics, or the systematic targeting that had driven 3 military families from Millfield in the past 18 months. The first warning came during lunch period on her second day. Elena had selected a corner table with optimal sightlines to all entrances, her back to the wall according to standard security protocols. She was reviewing calculus assignments when a shadow fell across her notebook. "Elena Rodriguez," a confident voice announced. Not a question, but a statement claiming knowledge and dominance. She looked up to see Tanner Blake, senior class president and quarterback of Millfield's championship football team. At 6 feet 2 inches, he possessed the natural authority that came from never facing consequences for his actions. His Letterman jacket displayed patches indicating leadership positions across multiple organizations. Flanking him stood Kyle Morrison, whose wrestler's build and scarred knuckles suggested experience with physical intimidation. To her right, Jordan Park held professional-grade camera equipment, his designer clothes marking him as the group's digital specialist. Slightly behind them, Alex Werner's wire-rimmed glasses and sweater vest seemed incongruous among the athletes, but his confident posture indicated belonging. Student Council welcomes military transfers. Tanner continued with practiced charm. Integration services help new students find their place in our community. Elena set down her pencil with deliberate precision, maintaining eye contact while assessing the tactical situation. I appreciate the offer, but I prefer managing my own adaptation process. Kyle dropped into the chair opposite her, his bulk making standard cafeteria furniture appear child-sized. Military discipline could benefit our wrestling program. My father owns Premier Athletics downtown, full membership, personal training, whatever you need. Jordan circled to her blind spot, already accessing her limited social media presence on his phone. I could build your profile here. New student transformations always generate engagement, 1,000 followers minimum before homecoming. The coordinated approach revealed practiced execution. Each member offered specific incentives while positioning to monitor her reactions from different angles. Tanner as the authoritative leader, Kyle as the physical presence, Jordan as the social gatekeeper. Their formation suggested tactical training beyond typical teenage improvisation. "That's generous," Elena responded, her tone remaining neutral while her posture straightened imperceptibly. But military families maintain operational focus on academics rather than social networking. Tanner's smile remained fixed, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Community integration requires understanding local expectations. Isolation makes high school challenging for outsiders. "I appreciate the concern," Elena said, meeting his gaze directly. "But I've developed effective adaptation strategies." The brief exchange established boundaries while revealing underlying dynamics. As the group prepared to leave, Tanner leaned closer, his voice dropping to near whisper. "My grandfather always said military families never understood their proper place in civilian communities." The comment was delivered with casual indifference, but Elena's training recognized the deliberate provocation. She maintained composed expression while internally shifting from routine awareness to elevated threat assessment. After school, Elena established a study routine at Tony's Pizza, 3 blocks from campus. The restaurant provided optimal conditions, public enough for safety, quiet enough for concentration, with clear sightlines to all entrances. She selected table 15 in the rear corner, positioning herself to observe both the main door and kitchen entrance. The elderly manager, Sofia Hernandez, approached with coffee pot in hand. "Refill on water?" she offered, though Elena's glass remained half full. "Thank you," Elena replied, recognizing the opening for connection. Sophia filled the glass, then hesitated. "Military family?" Elena's expression revealed brief surprise before returning to neutral. "Is it obvious?" "My son served 22 years Navy, 5 deployments." Sophia gestured toward Elena's precisely arranged study materials. "I recognize the setup. Optimal sightlines, back to wall, clear exit routes. The identification of shared experience created immediate understanding that transcended age differences. Military families inhabited a parallel America where permanent addresses were impossible, where friends became temporary fixtures, where parents disappeared into dangerous territories for months at a time. 3 schools in 4 years, Elena acknowledged. Sophia nodded with recognition born from personal experience. 4 schools from 6th grade through graduation for us. Listen, we need weekend help if you're interested. Flexible scheduling, decent wages, employee meal discounts. The job offer represented more than employment. It provided legitimate territorial presence, community connection, and protective framework of workplace relationships. I'd appreciate that opportunity. As Sophia returned to other customers, Elena recognized the value of this alliance. Military children learned quickly to identify potential supporters among civilian populations, individuals who understood their unique challenges without requiring detailed explanations. She returned to her physics homework while maintaining environmental awareness, processing the day's intelligence. Tanner's group had approached with coordinated strategy, suggesting regular recruitment operations targeting new students. Their body language indicated confidence derived from successful previous encounters. Most concerning, Tanner's closing comment revealed specific animosity toward military families rather than general teenage territorial behavior. What Elena couldn't have known was that Jordan Park was already compiling comprehensive digital intelligence on her family, including Miguel's deployment history, Carmen's medical credentials, and their previous duty assignments, that Alex Werner had identified her potential psychological vulnerabilities based on patterns common to frequently relocated military dependents, that Tanner Blake had already decided she represented a problem requiring elimination. The campaign against Elena Rodriguez would follow established protocols that had successfully driven multiple military families from Millfield without leaving actionable evidence of coordinated harassment. The Instagram story appeared Thursday morning, a carefully composed photograph of Eleanor eating alone, overlaid with melancholic music and the caption, "When military weird doesn't mix with normal people." Within 3 hours, it accumulated 200 views and 67 shares, each engagement spreading the message that Elena Rodriguez existed outside acceptable social boundaries. Jordan monitored analytics from his bedroom command center, where dual monitors displayed social media metrics and content creation software. His setup rivaled professional studios funded by parents who believed they were supporting legitimate media career development. "Engagement exceeds projections," he reported via encrypted group message. "Isolation phase proceeding ahead of schedule." Across town, Alex Werner reviewed psychological assessment materials on his tablet, bedroom walls covered with academic journals about social influence techniques. As the school psychologist's son, he had access to counseling resources and clinical terminology that provided scientific legitimacy to their operations. "Target displays classic military-dependent characteristics," he responded. "Hypervigilance masking attachment insecurity. Recommend pressuring community connections while emphasizing temporary residency status." Kyle's contribution was more direct. "Dad says her mother applied for training sessions at Premier Athletics. Application disappeared this morning. The systematic campaign operated across multiple fronts simultaneously. Digital isolation through coordinated social media messaging. Physical intimidation through hallway encounters where Kyle's presence accidentally blocked Elena's path. Institutional pressure through administrative channels where Alex's mother flagged Elena's academic file for adjustment monitoring. By Friday, whispered conversations stopped when Elena approached, only to resume with increased intensity after she passed. Previously empty lunch tables suddenly became reserved for upperclassmen only. Students who had made casual conversation now avoided eye contact, their discomfort suggesting warnings about association consequences. Elena documented each incident in a small notebook, recording times, participants, and behavioral patterns. She maintained academic routine without visible reaction to escalating social pressures, though her tactical awareness expanded to include digital surveillance countermeasures and alternative transportation routes. On Saturday morning, she arrived at Tony's Pizza for her first training shift, where Sophia provided operational intelligence based on previous cases. "This harassment pattern isn't new," Sophia explained, showing Elena a folder containing documentation from similar incidents. "Same approach every time military families move to Millfield. First recruitment attempt, then systematic isolation, then institutional pressure. Usually ends with family requesting transfer within 6 weeks." The confirmation transformed Elena's tactical assessment from individual targeting to systematic campaign. "How many families?" 3 in past 2 years that I know about. Air Force technical sergeant whose daughter suffered panic attacks after 6 weeks of social media harassment. marine logistics officer whose son was caught with planted contraband in his locker, army medical specialist whose twins transferred after coordinated cyberbullying. The pattern revealed sophisticated understanding of military family vulnerabilities. Transfers were always available options. Chain of command pressures could be applied to parents. The temporary nature of military assignments made fighting back seem futile compared to requesting new orders. "Why are you sharing this?" Elena asked directly. Sophia's expression hardened. "Because my son came back from deployment with injury-related discharge, and when rumors started about veteran instability, community support disappeared overnight. We had nowhere else to go, so we weathered it alone." She paused, controlling emotion with visible effort. "And because you're the first target I've seen who might be capable of effective resistance." The assessment reflected tactical recognition rather than flattery. Sophia had observed Elena's composed responses to provocations that had broken previous targets within days. Military children developed resilience through necessity, but Elena displayed capabilities beyond standard adaptation skills. Elena's phone chimed with notification from the school portal. Mandatory guidance appointment Monday, 10:15 a.m. with Dr. Patricia Werner, school psychologist. The timing confirmed Sophia's warning about institutional escalation following established patterns. Meanwhile, Carmen Rodriguez received official communication from Millfield Medical Center regarding budget restructuring that eliminated her nursing position effective immediately. The termination letter expressed regret, while referencing anonymous patient feedback and staff integration concerns that necessitated difficult personnel decisions. Miguel's commanding officer delivered notification of additional duty assignments requiring extended hours and weekend availability, effectively eliminating his ability to support his family during the developing crisis. The coordinated pressure targeted all family stability elements simultaneously. Social isolation for Elena, economic disruption for Carmen, professional obligations preventing Miguel's intervention. Previous military families had typically requested transfer at this point, unable to sustain pressure across multiple fronts without community support. But Elena Rodriguez possessed tactical training and alliance resources that previous targets had lacked. Sunday evening found Elena at table 15, reviewing not homework, but intelligence documentation. Sophia sat opposite her, contributing additional evidence from previous cases, while Tony's Pizza provided secure meeting location away from potential surveillance. Pattern always escalates when families document instead of transferring, Sophia explained, sliding another folder across the table. This was the Martinez family last year, Navy with 2 teenagers. They gathered evidence for 10 days before school administration suddenly found drugs in their daughter's backpack. The folder contained screenshots, incident reports, and timeline documentation matching Elena's experience with disturbing precision. The operation revealed careful escalation designed to appear as independent events while creating cumulative pressure. They follow established protocols, Elena observed, military terminology emerging naturally. Predictable patterns create exploitable vulnerabilities if we can anticipate their next moves. Officer David Walsh joined them during his off-duty period, contributing law enforcement perspective despite professional risk. His military bearing remained evident despite civilian police uniform, and his weathered expression suggested combat experience beyond standard community policing. Blake construction depends on preventing military housing expansion, Walsh confirmed, keeping his voice low despite the restaurant's evening emptiness. They maintain exclusive development contracts throughout the county. If the base builds independent family housing, they lose millions in potential civilian projects. The economic motivation explained systematic targeting, but operational sophistication suggested institutional support beyond construction company resources. "There's professional expertise behind this campaign," Elena noted, reviewing documented psychological techniques. "Digital manipulation uses advanced algorithms. Institutional pressure follows clinical escalation protocols. Harassment timing coordinates with administrative vulnerabilities." Walsh nodded grimly. "Pinnacle Services provides community integration consulting to Blake Construction. Their specialty is demographic management in development zones adjacent to military installations. Former intelligence personnel repurposing psychological operations for civilian applications." The revelation crystallized Elena's understanding of her opposition. She faced professional psychological operation designed by experts who understood military vulnerabilities and institutional leverage points. Previous targets had been children who happened to come from military families. Elena Rodriguez confronted something entirely different: strategists deploying systematic warfare against protected class citizens for corporate financial benefit. As their intelligence session continued, Elena's phone displayed message from unknown contact. "Friday, 4 p.m. Tony's Pizza. Time to teach military trash proper respect. Come alone or your family pays the price." The explicit threat escalated beyond previous psychological pressure into direct intimidation with implied violence. Elena showed the message to Walsh and Sophia, whose expressions confirmed this represented significant operational escalation. "Their accelerating timeline," Walsh observed with professional concern, "usually maintains psychological pressure for weeks before creating actionable incidents. Something has them worried about exposure." Elena considered tactical options with methodical precision. She could avoid the location entirely, depriving them of confrontation opportunity. She could report the threat to authorities, though institutional alignment with Blake family would likely neutralize official response. Or she could transform their operation against them. "I need complete intelligence on their capabilities and intended approach," she decided. "Sophia, can you access security footage showing previous confrontations they've orchestrated here?" "Already planned for that," Sophia confirmed. "Walsh, what's your assessment of official response options if this escalates to physical threat?" Walsh's expression revealed professional frustration. "Documentation helps, but I need evidence of actual assault before intervention authority kicks in. Their previous operations stay just within legal boundaries, specifically to avoid law enforcement involvement." Elena spent the following days in careful preparation. She studied security camera angles, identified optimal positioning for documentation, and rehearsed de-escalation techniques alongside defensive countermeasures should verbal boundaries fail to prevent physical confrontation. Most importantly, she maintained communication with Sophia and Walsh, ensuring backup presence without compromising the intelligence-gathering opportunity their planned confrontation represented. Friday arrived with institutional precision at Millfield High. Elena moved through her classes with composed focus while monitoring digital escalation. Jordan's social media campaign had intensified, deploying sophisticated manipulation algorithms that pushed fabricated content about her mental stability across multiple platforms simultaneously. Alex Werner orchestrated institutional pressure through his mother's psychological credentials, resulting in documentation supporting potential intervention while carefully avoiding specific accusations that might trigger parental notification protocols. Kyle Morrison's physical intimidation escalated to deliberate hallway collisions, testing Eleanor's response to contact. Each incident remaining technically deniable while increasing pressure that might provoke reaction during the planned confrontation. By afternoon, the stage was systematically prepared. Digital groundwork established expectations of instability. Institutional documentation created official concern about potential reactions. Physical intimidation tested response patterns and boundaries. At 3:45 p.m., Elena entered Tony's Pizza alone, selecting table 15 with optimal positioning for defensive maneuverability and security camera documentation. She arranged her textbooks with methodical precision, creating both study space and tactical perimeter. Her water glass remained positioned for potential defensive use, if necessary. Sophia moved through her shift routine with careful neutrality, providing no indication of coordination while ensuring optimal witnessing position for the approaching confrontation. In the parking lot, Walsh monitored from unmarked vehicle while maintaining radio contact with on-duty patrol units. At precisely 4:12 p.m., the 5 seniors entered Tony's Pizza in formation, suggesting practiced coordination rather than casual teenage gathering. Tanner Blake led with confident stride, displaying arrogance derived from never facing consequences. Kyle Morrison followed slightly behind and right, his physical presence designed for intimidation through proximity. Jordan Park carried professional camera equipment, positioning for optimal angles while appearing to document casual social interaction. Alex Werner maintained clinical detachment, his expression suggesting analytical assessment rather than emotional engagement. The 5th member, Ryan Cooper, followed last with nervous energy contrasting the others' confident approach, his anxious fidgeting suggesting reluctant participation rather than enthusiastic commitment. They surrounded table 15 in loose semicircle formation that had preceded confrontations with previous military dependents. Their practiced positioning suggested tactical coordination beyond typical teenage social interaction. Tanner initiated contact with calculated casualness, tone maintaining plausible deniability while positioning established clear intimidation intent. Elena Rodriguez, still eating alone, I see. Maybe if you weren't so obviously unstable, people would want to associate with you. The provocation followed established psychological operation protocols, identifying isolation as self-created rather than orchestrated, suggesting mental instability as explanation for social rejection, implying community consensus against the target. Elena maintained composed expression, hands remaining visible on table in deliberate demonstration of non-threatening posture. Tanner Blake, I see you've brought your entire group with recording equipment. Interesting approach for what you're presenting as casual conversation. The response established awareness of their coordination while creating verbal documentation of planned confrontation nature. Jordan's recording would now include evidence that Elena immediately recognized orchestrated approach rather than reacting with surprise or defensiveness. Kyle moved closer, using physical mass to invade her space while maintaining technically non-threatening posture. Military brats think they're tough. Let's see how tough you really are. His right hand remained partially concealed in jacket pocket, outline of brass knuckles, visible to Eleanor's trained observation, but not immediately apparent to casual witnesses. The positioning created physical threat with plausible deniability, exactly the approach that had successfully provoked defensive reactions from previous targets. I'm not interested in physical confrontation, Kyle, Elena stated clearly, voice pitched to carry to nearby tables and security cameras. I'm asking you to respect personal space and leave my table. The verbal boundary establishment created crucial documentation. She had explicitly requested space and declined confrontation, creating evidence that subsequent physical interaction would constitute harassment rather than mutual engagement. Jordan adjusted camera position, ensuring optimal angles. We're just having friendly conversation that happens to be recorded. Nothing wrong with documenting community integration, right? The recording confirmation proved Elena's assessment that confrontation had been promoted in advance, with audience expecting specific content rather than spontaneous interaction. Premeditation element strengthened potential legal consequences for whatever harassment followed. "I've asked you to leave my space," Elena repeated, maintaining calm tone while establishing clear record. "You've surrounded my table with 5 people, including at least one carrying concealed weapon. This constitutes coordinated harassment. Direct identification of Kyle's brass knuckles created visible reaction among the group. Tanner's expression flickered with uncertainty, while Ryan's nervous fidgeting intensified. They hadn't anticipated victim awareness of tactical approach or willingness to verbally identify threat elements. Alex attempted narrative control, voice carrying practiced clinical concern. "This paranoid reaction is exactly what we're worried about, Elena. Seeing threats where none exist represents classic stress response. We're trying to help." The psychological framing represented sophisticated manipulation designed to recontextualize her accurate threat assessment as mental instability. Previous targets had likely responded with emotional defensiveness, reinforcing narrative of irrational reaction. Elena maintained tactical focus, addressing Jordan's camera directly. "For everyone watching this recording, I'm Elena Rodriguez, 17 years old. These 5 seniors have coordinated harassment campaign targeting military families in Millfield. Kyle Morrison is currently carrying brass knuckles, constituting illegal weapons possession. This confrontation was orchestrated to provoke reaction, justifying removal of military families from the community." Direct address to recording audience represented unexpected countermeasure that transformed their documentation tool into evidence against them. By clearly identifying harassment context and specific weapons threat, she created public record that couldn't be easily edited or reframed. Jordan's expression revealed momentary panic as he realized his recording had become evidence rather than propaganda tool. "She's lying about weapons. We're concerned students checking on someone acting strangely." "Then Kyle won't mind showing what's in his right jacket pocket," Elena suggested calmly, gaze steady on camera. "Since there's no weapon, according to you." Tactical redirection created decision point. If Kyle revealed brass knuckles, recording would document illegal weapons possession. If he refused, reaction would suggest concealment supporting Elena's claims. Kyle responded with predictable aggression of someone unaccustomed to tactical opposition. "You think you're smart, military brat. Let's see how smart you feel after this." He pulled brass knuckles from pocket with practiced movement, metal gleaming under fluorescent lighting as viewers began typing shocked comments. The weapon provided irrefutable evidence of premeditated intent to threaten or harm, transforming confrontation from plausibly deniable harassment to documented criminal intimidation. "Kyle has just displayed brass knuckles on Jordan's recording," Elena narrated for camera, maintaining composed documentation rather than emotional reaction. "This represents clear threat of physical assault against a minor being broadcast to," she glanced at viewer counter, 178 people. Methodical documentation contrasted sharply with the group's escalating agitation. Their operation depended on provoking emotional response, supporting narrative about unstable military children. Elena's composed tactical approach instead created public evidence of premeditated harassment. "Shut up," Kyle demanded, moving toward her with aggressive intent, brass knuckles fully visible. "Time to teach you what happens when military trash thinks they belong in our town." Explicit threat combined with physical movement toward minor created actionable criminal behavior captured on multiple recording devices. Jordan's camera documented approach from optimal angle, while Tony's security cameras captured contextual positioning, preventing selective editing. As Kyle closed distance with clear, aggressive intent, Elena maintained perfect defensive positioning. Hands remained visible, posture non-threatening, until the moment his forward momentum brought brass knuckles within striking distance. What happened next occurred in less than 4 seconds, according to security timestamps, though viewers would analyze footage frame by frame for days afterward. Elena executed precise defensive maneuver, redirecting Kyle's momentum rather than opposing it directly. Movement required minimal force while using his weight and balance against him, sending his 6-foot frame into Jordan's camera equipment with controlled precision. Collision disrupted recording momentarily, though audio continued capturing chaotic aftermath. Alex's voice shouted instructions while fumbling with pepper spray canister. In confusion, hasty deployment sent chemical irritant toward Tanner rather than Elena, resulting in immediate painful reaction from unintended target. "My eyes!" Tanner screamed, agonized sound captured perfectly on restored video feed. "What the hell, Alex?" Friendly fire casualty created further disarray, coordinated operation dissolving into chaotic individual reactions. Jordan attempted terminating recording, but panic-induced fumbling instead switched to secondary angle, providing clearer documentation of brass knuckles now lying on floor beside overturned chairs. Throughout chaos, Elena maintained defensive positioning without pursuing retreating attackers. Hands remained visible, movements limited to necessary self-protection rather than aggressive response. Contrast between her composed behavior and their disintegrating coordination created compelling visual evidence directly contradicting narrative about unstable military children. Officer Walsh entered through main doors, timing precisely calibrated to follow documented criminal threat rather than preceding it. Body camera provided additional recording source as he assessed scene with professional detachment. "Weapons on ground, hands where I can see them," he ordered with calm authority, cutting through confusion. The group froze in various postures of disarray, suddenly confronted with law enforcement response to what they had planned as controlled intimidation. Previous operations had carefully avoided crossing lines justifying police intervention, allowing institutional harassment to continue without official documentation. "Officer," Tanner began, reddened eyes and strained voice undermining authoritative tone, "this is misunderstanding. We were talking to Elena when she attacked Kyle without provocation." Walsh retrieved brass knuckles with gloved hand, placing them in evidence bag while maintaining professional documentation. "Interesting theory. Fortunately, we have multiple video sources showing Mr. Morrison approaching with illegal weapon while making explicit threats, currently recorded and witnessed by," he glanced at Jordan's equipment, "194 viewers. Methodical evidence collection established official documentation that couldn't be easily dismissed through institutional connections." As patrol units arrived, Walsh continued addressing teenagers with calm professionalism, contrasting their increasing agitation. "Kyle Morrison, you're under arrest for possession of prohibited weapon, assault with deadly weapon, and attempted battery on minor." He secured brass knuckles in evidence bag before continuing. "Rest of you are persons of interest in apparent coordinated harassment and criminal conspiracy. Official classification transformed carefully orchestrated psychological operation into documented criminal activity. Previous confrontations had remained beneath law enforcement thresholds through calculated restraint and institutional protection. Kyle's weapons escalation had crossed legal boundaries that even Blake family connections couldn't easily dismiss. As patrol vehicles departed with arrested teenagers, Elena remained at table 15, providing official statement with composed precision reflecting military upbringing. Her account detailed systematic harassment pattern rather than focusing on individual confrontation, establishing context connecting incident to broader campaign targeting military families. By evening, Jordan's recording had been archived across multiple platforms, preventing deletion or editing that might misrepresent confrontation. Tony's security footage was secured through official evidence procedures. Ryan Cooper had provided comprehensive statement detailing months of coordinated harassment targeting multiple military families. The systematic campaign had encountered what military strategists recognized as asymmetric response, target capabilities they hadn't anticipated and couldn't counter through established protocols. Their psychological operation depended on isolated victims responding emotionally to calculated provocations. Elena Rodriguez had instead transformed their documentation tools into evidence against them. As she returned home that evening, Elena found her parents waiting in living room, expressions revealing they had received notification about the incident. Miguel's military bearing remained perfect, despite obvious concern, while Carmen's medical training enabled immediate assessment for potential injuries. Officer Walsh called, Miguel explained without preamble. Said you handled confrontation with textbook precision. 5-to-1 odds, one armed with brass knuckles, Elena reported with military concision. No injuries sustained. Multiple recording sources documented entire incident. Walsh connected it to systematic campaign targeting military families. Carmen moved first, professional assessment transitioning to maternal concern as she embraced her daughter. We face challenges together, she reminded Elena softly, even when we're proud of independent capability. Miguel joined them, hand resting briefly on Elena's shoulder with gentle pressure conveying both approval and support. You maintained defensive positioning without escalation, perfect application of training principles. The family moment transcended tactical assessment, creating emotional safety after controlled confrontation. Elena had maintained perfect composure throughout incident, but now allowed natural reaction to threat engagement in secure environment. They've been targeting military families for years, Elena explained, sharing intelligence gathered through alliance with Sophia and Walsh. Coordinated campaign to force transfers and prevent military housing expansion impacting Blake construction contracts. Miguel's expression hardened with recognition of systematic targeting rather than isolated incident. His tactical assessment immediately expanded from individual confrontation to strategic implications for military families throughout community. This goes beyond teenage harassment, he observed. Organized campaign against military personnel requires official response at command level. Elena's documentation had established evidence connecting individual harassment to systematic pattern, creating federal civil rights case rather than local disciplinary matter. Unlike previous targets who faced isolation during harassment escalation, Rodriguez family now possessed documented evidence and institutional support extending beyond regional influence networks. As investigation expanded over following weeks, Elena's resistance had established protection template benefiting military families nationwide. Her tactical approach, documenting harassment while maintaining defensive positioning, creating alliances with civilian supporters, and transforming opposition tools into evidence against them, provided framework other military children could follow when targeted by similar operations. The systematic campaign hadn't ended completely, but had lost operational secrecy that previously enabled successful targeting without accountability. Federal oversight maintained investigation across multiple jurisdictions, creating documentation continuity despite individual family transfers or local pressure tactics. Most importantly, Elena's stand had established communication network connecting military dependents across multiple installations experiencing similar targeting patterns. Her documentation protocols helped families recognize coordinated campaigns disguised as isolated incidents, transforming individual vulnerability into collective resistance through pattern recognition and alliance formation. 6 months later, Elena Rodriguez walked confidently through Millfield High corridors. No longer the isolated new student, but recognized leader among military dependents and civilian allies who understood systematic targeting required coordinated resistance. The security camera that had recorded her confrontation now served as reminder that documentation, tactical awareness, and principled resistance could transform individual challenges into community-wide protection. Her experience provided foundation for national military family defense framework, ensuring future targets would never face such campaigns alone.